It's fantastic to see you all here in this room with us. I'd like to begin by thanking especially our guests, Tom Watson, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, long-standing friend of Israel. I elect Naomi Verbin, a leading member of the Israeli Labour Party. And we are incredibly grateful that she's flown here to be with us this evening. And Mark Regeb, Israel's ambassador here in the United Kingdom. We are particularly honoured to have Ayelet here with us this month when we mark the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Oslo Accords. Ayelet was a close aide of the architect of that historic agreement, Yitzhak Rabin, and worked for him as a legal advisor during the Oslo process. Oslo was, of course, a moment of great optimism. Sadly, many of those hopes, which Israelis, Palestinians, and people around the world shared, have subsequently been cruelly dashed. Too many lives have been lost and too much blood spilled on both sides. But Oslo should also be a reminder to us that with good faith, compromise and brave leadership, progress can be made. Too often, those outside the region believe that peace can be imposed by outsiders, by unilateral action, whether it be by President Trump or by one-sided resolutions at the UN, by demonising and delegitimising the state of Israel through the BDS movement, or by politicians providing a platform and credibility to the very extremes whose wave of suicide bombings did so much to damage Oslo in its early years. Our role should be honest brokers, respected and trusted by all sides. And our purpose should be to encourage the Israeli government and Palestinian Authority to sit down and negotiate directly with one another again. Before I hand over to Ayelet, I would like to say a brief word about the relationship between the Jewish community in Britain and the Labour Party. I've spent much time in recent months meeting people in synagogues, at communal events, and indeed on the doorsteps of North London. The reaction I encounter is almost universal. It is one of anxiety, of hurt, and of anger, and incomprehension that our party could have treated a minority community in this country with such disregard, arrogance, and contempt. A bewilderment that our party, with its long and honourable history of fighting racism, should have decided to lecture Jews on what does and does not constitute anti-Semitism. And yes, a real fear that our party under the current leadership might soon be in government. This is a collective failure, and only remorse, humility and empathy can begin to redress it. As Labour Party members, we all bear responsibility for what has been done in our name. And I'd just like, at this point, to welcome what the Shadow Foreign Secretary said today in her speech to conference, and the commitment she gave in her speech to throw out the anti-Semites and those who those who wish for Israel's destruction. We support her in that. When the history of our party is Britain, this dark chapter will be one of great shame. And the tragedy is that it follows chapters of which we can be truly proud, of how the early Labour Party stood with Jewish migrants to oppose anti-Semitism and pernicious legislation singling out aliens, of how our party endorsed the principle of a Jewish homeland in Palestine even before the Balfour Declaration, and of how Labour leaders from Harold Wilson to Tony Blair and Gordon Brown forged bonds of mutual respect with the Jewish community in Britain and the people of Israel. It is this history and our values which should give us the confidence to speak out against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in the Labour Party. So let's be clear. We must stand up for the Middle East's only democracy and free society. We must stand up to those who deny the Jewish people's right to self-determination and attempt to brand it a racist endeavour. And we must stand up against anti-Semitism whenever and wherever we see it. Let me finish by just saying this, and I know many in this room know this. We must never stand silently by. Too many people do. Don't let one of them be you. Thank you very much. It is now my great pleasure and my honour to introduce our next speaker, who I've already talked to you about. Ayelet Nameas Berlin, our member of the Knesset from the Israeli Labour Party.
Thank you. Well, I needed time to pause in order to get my speech. So. Well, good evening. What a heartwarming event it is. Joan, Tom, Vice Chairs of LFI attending this room, the LFI office team with whom I've spent the last 2 days. You're amazing. Thank you so much. LFI supporters here in this room. It's not trivial that you're here tonight, from what I gather. I hope I won't cry. This is very moving. Ambassador Reagan. I would like to thank you for your kind invitation in these rather stormy times. And thank you for making sure that I will get the real chance to understand what's really going on here. It is a special privilege to be here tonight. My maternal grandparents, oh, God help us, Sarah and Abraham, who were born in Israel, both were born in Israel, both served in the British Army in Egypt in the early 1940s. So you can really safely say that I am a result of British-made introductions. Funnily enough, my grandparents' families have been in Israel for centuries, might not have met if it weren't for their joint service, so it's a good chance to say thank you. I stand here before you, a proud Jewish Israeli woman, whose ancestors arrived in what was to become the state of Israel as early as 1777. My family survived the horrors of the 20th century to get to live in an independent state of their own. My paternal grandparents were the sole survivors in their families when the Holocaust came to Thessaloniki. They built Israel brick by brick, so their grandchildren, that's us, as well as our children, could live safely in a Jewish democratic state. My husband Ivry is here with me tonight. He's also a descendant of pioneers and a lieutenant colonel in the Armored Corps. He unfortunately knows at first hand what it means to fight for the security of your people. Both of us have had the rare and unique privilege to be in our political and professional lives with unique leaders. I joined Yitzhak Rabin's staff in 1991 and saw greatness in the making, not just in the work he made to make Israel fairer, more secure and prosperous, but the extraordinary courage he showed to try to make peace with our enemies. My husband was an advisor to our late President Shimon Peres and played a central role in the attempt to reach peace. As Joan mentioned, we have just marked the 25th anniversary to the Oslo Accords. We remember well the hope and expectation, but cannot ignore what the violent terrorism that followed it and the incitement against Israel, a machine of hatred that has never stopped. But as Israelis and friends of Israel, it is our duty to try and regain and maintain the horizon and hope for a better future for our people. Ever since I was first invited, it seems like things here have taken a turn for the worse. Every time I read another story in the news about the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, I asked myself whether it was the right thing for me to come here. But then the news also made me very much aware of your heroic struggle. There are people here tonight for whom, and you know who you are, members of parliament, who are really fighting for a more balanced discourse. And you are paying a heavy personal price. And I could not see myself doing anything other than coming to show my solidarity, friendship, and gratitude. Thank you. Your struggle against the demonization of Israel, and even more importantly, your relentless fight against rising anti-Semitism is greatly appreciated. I come here bearing the greetings from our chairman, Avi Gabay. He has broken our links with Jeremy Corbyn's office for so long as it fails to address anti-Semitism adequately. However, the Israeli Labour Party will continue to show solidarity with our many friends in the Labour Party who are fighting against anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel. We believe that our shared values remain the same. LFI tries all the time to tell the real story of what happens in Israel, without trying to hide or gloss over the difficult situation with the Palestinians, but rather looking at it in an honest, balanced way, based on a genuine commitment and concern for both peoples. It is really only by coming to Israel and speaking to people from a wide range of perspectives that you can begin to appreciate our achievements and engage with the complex issues we face. If some of you have not been to Israel yet, please come, be my guests. This is the only democracy in the Middle East. Please come to Jerusalem. I must be very clear, thank you. I must be very clear though, it has been deeply disturbing for me and the Israeli Labour Party to read about the shocking examples of anti-Semitism within the British Labour and the failure, the reluctance, so it seems, to address it properly. And I ask you, Mr. Corbyn, what kind of leadership have you shown to root this out? By arguing over the internationally accepted definition of anti-Semitism, you are indicated that you know better than Jews what constitutes anti-Semitism. How can you make such a claim after all that happened in your party? As a member of Knesset, I won't stay silent when anti-Semitism arises from the right, and God knows I have the credentials for that. And we have seen that coming from certain governments in Europe. But I will be just as intolerant when we see manifestations of world's oldest hatred coming from the left. Anti-Semitism, we have seen, of course, caused deep hurt, first and foremost, to the wonderful British Jewish community who wish to return the right to be both proudly British and at the same time proudly committed to Israel's welfare. It has been particularly painful for British Jews who have given a lifetime of support to the Labour Party and its values. And there is no place for irony, Mr. Corbyn, when you try to imply the Jews are not really British. You had a good opportunity to apologize for that on Sunday, on Andrew Marr, if anyone missed that. But you once again chose not to do so. And once again, you have left MP Luciana Berger on her own, completely undefended by her leader. As Jews, of course, we are inherently familiar with anti-Semitism and what it means. We know that anti-Semitic prejudices passes down through generation, and when these conspiracy theories suddenly regain popularity, it is because of problems within the society that have nothing to do with Jews. I fear that some are playing with fire, giving oxygen to forces not so long ago were completely illegitimate in mainstream Britain. All of you here today, fighting against anti-Semitism, are not only fighting for the rights of the British Jewish community or of Israel, but you are fighting for the moral well-being of your own party and British society as a whole. I've heard accusations of anti-Semitism are being used to stifle criticism of Israel. This is absurd. As an opposition member, I wake up in the morning and I spend every day criticizing the policies of the Israeli government. But that is not a living, a vibrant, a lively democracy does. They continue to be friends with Israel and not critics of the Israeli government. But we must be very, very, very clear. When we consider anti-Semitism, it's not mere criticism of Israel, but those who wish, 73 years after half of world Jewry were murdered in the Holocaust, to undermine or question the very existence of our country are anti-Semitic, plain and simple. There is no question to that. Furthermore, we in Israel find it impossible to comprehend how associating and showing solidarity with terrorists who have murdered Israeli, clearly ignoring their inhumanity and hate, does anything to advance the cause of peace. In fact, it does the very opposite. It helps those who have lost any kind of faith in a future settlement. Please bear that in mind. So please, Mr. Corbyn, stop acting like you are the victim of this. You have more terrorists who have killed Israelis than Israelis. It is your choice, but don't expect us to turn the other cheek. We in the Israeli Labour Party share your values and share your concerns. We are committed to finding a peaceful resolution to our conflict with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution and maintaining the security of Israel. We stand firmly behind the values of the Israeli Declaration of Independence for a state that is Jewish and democratic. It is those values who brought my grandparents to leave their families and join the British Army in the early 1940s. It is the same values that we were fighting in World War II. And thank you for doing that. We strongly believe that equality for all is vital for Israel. And we fought to include the principle for all Israeli citizens, Jews and non-Jews, in the nation-state law. We will continue to fight to amend the law to ensure the principle of equality is included. It is supported by many Israelis. However, in the debate as to the right solution of the conflict, two very important points need to be made. First, supporting the two-state solution, as both our parties do, means respecting the right of the Jewish people to self-determination. To those, thank you. To those who believe or hope that supporting the Palestinian cause means pushing for the elimination of Zionism, I have a message. We will not allow for that to happen. Let us not forget that it was the socialist Zionists who have gave their all to found the state of Israel. We will continue to follow their aspirations as well as the core values of both our parties. To help us move towards peace, we need the British Labour Party to take a balanced approach. That brings me to a second very crucial point. There is nothing wrong with challenging Israel's governments when it fails to pursue any kind of negotiations for peace. But it is absolutely crucial to challenge Palestinian actions which completely and utterly undermine peace. Last week, Ari Fold, a father of four, was stabbed in the back and murdered by a 16-year-old terrorist. The family of that terrorist will now be paid a generous monthly salary by the Palestinian Authority that will total to an amount of approximately £2 million. In 2017, a sum of £210 million was paid to terrorist prisoners and their families. I know LFI has been campaigning vigorously on this issue, and I call upon Labour to send an uncompromising message to the Palestinian Authority. Incentivizing terror is totally wrong and unacceptable. My first childhood memory were the sirens of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. When I first became a mother, it was my silent prayer that my children would have a different first memory. But their first memories are the sirens warning us of the missiles fired by Hamas in 2014. And yet never has it crossed our minds to instill a sense of hatred in them. We know that making peace requires compromises between moderates, but it also demands that the extremists are not strengthened. That is what we are trying to do in the Labour Party in Israel. This is why your support is so crucial to those of us who seek a solution to the conflict, one which does not undermine Israel's security. I came to stand here tonight with all of you, but I also hope that my words will have a strength of their own and may be carried into the minds and hearts who are not here and have been willing to jeopardize the values for which Labour has always stood and the historic bond between our two countries. I wish to thank you once more for having me here and making me feel so welcome. I promise to reciprocate. Please come to Israel. We're waiting for you. I've been going around the Labour Party conference today, and it's amazing to see how vibrant your democracy is. But people were afraid to carry a very specific flag. They only carried one specific flag. It wasn't mine. It was difficult to see that. People are afraid to carry the Israeli flag. In this room tonight, I have no question. This is my It is a very nice flag, and I've got to tell you, thank you for respecting that. It was very important for me to do this.
Can I say, that was a tour de force. I don't think anybody in this room failed to see how deeply that moves you and moves us. And I know for me, and I hope for everybody else, it will give us the courage of our convictions. We are your friends. Thank you. Just before I introduce our next speaker, I know Emily was, sorry Emily, the shadow secretary is with us. Just before you arrived, Emily, I had welcomed the commitment you gave to conference this afternoon to throw out anti-Semites and those who were great pleasure to introduce a very good and strong friend of Israel. For a very long time he has been a friend of Israel. The deputy leader of our party, Tom Watson.
Of the need for us to be humble, and I say this in all humility to you tonight. I am genuinely proud of each and every one of you for attending this event. You know what that is. We know what that is. And I stand here as a proud and long-standing supporter of Labour Friends of Israel, because I've seen for myself the work that this organisation does. It's crucial to assist parliamentarians to better understand the complexities of the conflict, but also Israel's huge achievements, its diversity, its pluralism, and the challenge it faces. And it's a particular pleasure to be sharing the platform tonight with Ayelet, who spoke with passion and deep integrity about her experiences and the challenges that she gives all of us in the Labour Party. And it's a great honour to be here again with our very own ambassador from Israel, who is a very well-read man, and it's great that he's here at the conference. References to Oslo tonight were very poignant for me, because I remember as a student, as a guest of the Union of Jewish Students, flying to Israel on my first visit, when the Oslo talks had just broken and the region was in the apex of hope. And we all had joy in our hearts that after many decades, peace may finally have been in everyone's grasp. And I remember the moral example of Yitzhak Rabin, who had the courage to hold out his hand for peace. And when I returned a couple of years ago as deputy leader of the Labour Party, I visited the spot where he lost his life, when we were at the nadir of hope. But with people like Ayelet, who campaigned time and time again to find a peaceful solution. When we look at our colleagues in the Israeli Labour Party, and all they do, day in, day out, in the desperation they see in the situation they find themselves in, because they want to keep alive the prospects of peace. And we want them to keep alive the prospects of peace. We want them to find reconciliation. We want them to work with us to help them find a two-state solution. And those are goals which we all share in the Labour Party. And I just say to you, Isla, everyone in this room stands with you in solidarity in that pursuit. We're proud of you, and we're honoured that you're coming. This means three things. Firstly, of course, it means supporting those in Israel and Palestine working for peace and coexistence. Secondly, in my mind, it means opposing the BDS movement. Thirdly, it means we fiercely oppose those who draw grotesque parallels between the Jewish state and the Nazis who murdered. Rid this party of anti-Semitism, and I know it's important to all of us in this room that those commitments are delivered. Now, I recognise the hurt that's been caused. I recognise the pain that has been thrust upon our friends in the Jewish community. I know how failing to tackle a problem risks bringing eternal shame. I just hope that we can do what we can to rebuild that trust and confidence. And I know with people like Joan Ryan, chairing this organisation, courageous, pounded out by people who've only just joined the Labour Party. With people like I know that journey will be long, but I tell you, we will do everything we can to rebuild that trust. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for showing us.
Tom, thank you. Thank you so much for everything you said tonight, but for all of us in this room and in this Labour Party, we know that we need your commitment and your voice in that shadow cabinet, in that leadership, when we need it in our party. And thank God you've come here tonight and said So now for our final speaker tonight, who you know well because he comes to each of these receptions and we are always pleased to welcome him. The Israeli Ambassador to the United Kingdom, Mark Regan.
Tom, Joan, Ayelet, friends, we gather during the Jewish festival of Sukkot. But unfortunately, as was said, this year's celebrations have been overshadowed by serious concerns. Concerns that were reiterated to me just this morning when I visited a synagogue here in Liverpool. Anti-Semitism has raised its ugly head in British public life, both blatantly and masquerading as so-called anti-Zionism. So I want to express my gratitude to all of you here tonight for standing up to this bigotry. And there is one person in particular I want to thank, your chair, Joan Ryan. Joan, since I became ambassador, I think it's fair to say that we've had more than one frank discussion. You are a friend, a critical one. And it is your firm and considered approach, not the voices of hatred and hostility, that can help advance the secure and lasting peace my people and everyone here in this room so deeply want to see. Some attending this conference have suggested that the circumstances around Israel's foundation are racist. What an extraordinary allegation. An allegation that flies against the values that have defined the British Labour movement this past century. In 1917, following the Balfour Declaration, the New Statesman asked how anyone could oppose the emancipation of the Jews, I quote, the most ancient of oppressed nationalities. In 1920, an emergency Labour conference resolution declared solidarity with the persecuted Jews of Eastern Europe and called upon the government to immediately advance the Zionist program. 26 subsequent Labour conferences adopted pro-Zionist motions with overwhelming majorities. Unabashedly supporting the establishment of a Jewish national home. And during the terrible years of the Second World War and the Holocaust, Labour's 1944 conference resolved there was, and I quote, surely neither hope nor meaning in a Jewish national home unless a Jewish state was to be created. So far from being seen as racist or reactionary, supporting Zionism was an integral part of Labour's progressive agenda. That is why when Israel achieved independence 70 years ago, socialists in this country and across the planet rejoiced. And that is why those same socialists stood with Israel when it was attacked at birth by the neighboring Arab states. Today, Israel is a strong country with the ability not just to defend itself, but to support its allies, including the United Kingdom, in the fight against terrorism. This cooperation has saved countless lives. So those who called at this conference to curtail our defence and security partnership, I asked them, who in the end are you really going to harm? From Attlee to Wilson to Foote, from Kinnock to Blair to Brown, Labour leaders have supported Israel's cause precisely because it is an anti-racist cause. In the words of James Callaghan, to call Zionism racism would only undermine efforts to combat racial discrimination. So when self-proclaimed anti-racists overlook this fundamental truth and claim that we Zionists do not know history, ironically, it is they who have not studied history or learned from it. Friends, for your solidarity with Israel, I commend you. For your dedication to the cause of peace, I salute you. And for your unwavering commitment to fighting anti-Semitism, I thank you. I thank you all very much.